Well, welcome everybody. My name is Kara Maksood. I'm a financial behavior specialist. It's been exciting to be able to kind of go out beyond the money habitudes, and that's why I asked if anybody uses the tool. The microphone was echoing, so I put it down.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep, that's fine.
So most people, if they've used the tool, they've done some read up or training. We do offer all of that kind of stuff as well. But this session is really to talk about why behavioral finance is really important within our financial education curriculums and why we're seeing financial education just as a whole not working at the rate we're giving out. People aren't receiving that knowledge. And so what we're going to look at today is defining financial education, literacy, and capability, what the difference of those three are, how they're connected, why financial education alone is not doing the work, and then how do we meet people where they're at, where they're coming from, all the money messaging they've been given, and then we're going to talk about some examples of capability. And I like an interactive session, so please feel free to stop me or comment. Again, this is so we can all take from it. But when we think about the three differences of financial education, financial literacy, and financial capability, the education part is very much the curriculum, right? That is what you get in the textbook. This is how a savings rule is set up, 50, 20, 30, right? And there's very clear, like it's easy, it follows on a spreadsheet, right? It's something we can educate someone on, explain it makes sense. For the person to be financially literate, they then are able to take that education and they can explain it back, they understand what needs to get done, they would know when to apply certain education in different situations. And I want to just remind people here, I think often when we think about financial education, we think about the basics. We think about budgeting, savings, investing at the initial level. Financial education is cumulative, right? And so as people become more sophisticated financial lives, the financial education gets greater and greater and greater, but these founding principles, these really basic concepts just get grown out. So if you've missed the very, very beginning and you haven't really gotten all of that education, sometimes as things get more and more complex, it gets a little bit more confusing. So obviously, as we're moving from education to literacy, right, we've got that moment of, okay, I understood the education, I'm literate in it, it's just like reading or any kind of basic math, right, we're good. But what happens between literacy and capability? So my favorite example is always, I know I'm supposed to eat my vegetables. I start every day and I'm like, I'm gonna be healthy and I'm not gonna eat 2 donuts and 3 cups of coffee. I'm gonna do all these other things. I'm educated on what health looks like. I know I can tell others you should have so much protein, so many vitamins, so many vegetables. Yet every day by 2:30, my 5 children have aggravated me and something's gone wrong. And the only thing that's going to make me feel better is a coffee and a donut. Right? And so that starts to calm me down and it makes me feel good. And then I may have some guilt or some shame after, how did I do that? Why did I do that? There's no difference when it comes to people that are financially educated and financially literate who then make decisions in their financial lives that didn't start with, I know the plan. I'm good with the plan. I knew what I was supposed to do, right? You're emotionally in the store. Your credit line will allow you to buy something. You don't have the money right now in your checking account, but you're like, you know what? I'll pay it off, right? And then all of a sudden, we've got this snowballing happening. So that capability component really has emotion. It has relation. It has association in it because even though we're literate and we've got the education, we can't always make the best decision when the decision faces us. So a story I always like to tell is in an emergency situation where I lived through a situation where my daughter had very badly severed her finger. We needed immediate care. We were in another country. And they said to me, well, you have to wait for your insurance company to approve a medevac. And I thought, oh, Jesus, it's going to lead to that. She had severed part of her hand. And so I thought, the first initial, I'm waiting. And as I'm waiting and I'm watching this kid, I thought, okay, just tell me what it's going to cost me out of pocket right now to pay to have this done, because I am educated enough and I understand the insurance system, I knew that I could then submit the charges. Now, could I float myself between me paying and then when the insurance company was going to reimburse me? Yes. But it was in a very emotional state that I was in, right? I had a kid, she's bleeding. And so being financially educated allowed me to make a decision in that emotional state that I was like, okay, we've got this. But for some people, that emotional state has you not thinking clearly. And even if you are financially educated, you can't tap that education. You can't go and process that information, because the way our brain works, for every one logical message our brain gets, we won't go through a psychology lesson, we get 5 emotional messages. And those messages are fear, those messages are, rationale, those messages are how do I keep myself safe. And so when we're in these situations, we can't always act on the capability component. Any questions or thoughts around financial capability? So we see that they're all connected, right? We see that they're all part of this circle. And as I mentioned before, as we grow up in our financial lives and as our financial health takes on different components, we have to continue to make sure that we're capable. So think about if you're financially educated and you understand what you make in your paycheck, what's put away for retirement, how to, save and invest, get married, you know what to do for your family, you buy a house, you have a mortgage, great. This is working. You get divorced somewhere in this circle, and you start making decisions around fighting for custody or fighting for different prices of alimony or whatever it might be. And you get married again, and you have a second family. Your financial education and your literacy, you still have that knowledge. But now there's all of these people that are vying with you and your money, and so your capability amongst making the best decision, I think we could all agree, in divorce, the best option, other than paying lawyers, would be to take your money, whatever portions you each would like to nicely agree on, and go separate ways and play at different sandboxes. Yet, divorce is a huge industry. Why? Because emotionally, people would rather argue with someone they've already decided and spend a ton of money arguing than take their money and go. And so that capability component there, right, is driven more by emotion than it is by education. Does that make sense to everyone? So when we think about the people that we teach and the people that we're instructing, what's missing from financial education? So first and foremost, the way someone earns. Most financial education textbooks don't start with, if you're a gig worker and the beach town you work in only has people in it 4 months out of the year, or if you're a hairdresser and wedding season is only May through September, right? Financial education are these kind of great big rules that overarch how we should save, how we should invest, how we should budget. Well, how do I budget when I make 65% of the money I'm going to make for the year in a 4-month window? Right? There's that feast and famine. Psychologically, there's that feast and famine. I'm going to be on this roller coaster. So the financial education doesn't always start with how people are earning and what they're earning and the way that they're earning. The family system or culture. So we do a lot of work around financial interdependence, for those of you who may be familiar with that. And that talks about how the family system and how the financial system don't often match up. So in a low-income community, oftentimes if you are housing and you have food benefit, your financial education is don't lose the benefit. Don't make more than the threshold because we have our housing, we have our food, and if we go over that number, we lose all of this. And they call it a cliff, right? Because the difference you need to go out and make to cover all of this that you're getting in services is quite large. So if the family that you're at home with is telling you, this is how we work, this is how we forward our lives, And then you go to a classroom, and the classroom teacher or the instructor says, hey, we're gonna talk about budgets, we're gonna talk about saving, we're gonna talk about investments. How is that landing on you? Do you think you're hearing any of that? No, because your family system is telling you, listen, you'll be fine as long as you stay under this threshold, you keep your house, keep your food benefit, right? And so that becomes more prominent in someone's life, their family system. Remember, humans, they want to be part of their community. They want their people around. If this person goes and taps themselves out of, especially if they are all living in one home together, everybody loses that benefit. So we're fighting against a family system or a culture. If you go into a community where faith-based and tithing, which I know we have a bunch here of, and we don't start a budget line with tithing, we have a problem, right? If you've got a budget that there's no tithing in there, and that's how somebody does, their budgeting, they're like, well, where's my number? And so I've had financial coaches and counselors look at people and say, well, you're short at the end. So this seems optional. Not if you're part of a faith-based community. That is not optional. And that community is usually there to support you. It's okay, it was echoing, so I'm good.
Well, I
think
need
they can-
it for the recording.
Oh, shoot.
I can kill this.
Sorry. Uh-oh. Always causing trouble. Is that better?
So I have a question. Later in your presentation, do you have tips or suggestions on how we can bring some of these pieces in?
Yes, and at our booth, the workbook, we just produced this, and this was the Money Habitudes workbook that really was for the cards, and there's small worksheet activities, and it really talks about how, first of all, what is your personality? We know that it costs someone 30% more if they're a late person. They missed the bus, they gotta take a taxi. They didn't pack lunch at home, they need to go buy it when they're out. It actually costs you more just based on who you are as a person, right? And so then we go through what kind of money messages are you hearing at home? What kind of community expectations? If you're part of a Latin community, you'll see people that are living low income, but they've gotta have that quinceañera. That is really, really important. I don't know if prom is big here. I just worked with a low-income group in Miami, and to hear some of the dollar amounts that were being spent on prom, I was like, whoa. But for social media, which we go through that on page 5, right? Social media, to be able to show the world, look what I've got, look what I've been able to create. You and I would agree, to spend $5,000 on prom, would that not be better in a high interest bearing account over the next 20 years? It'd be real money. But again, if our brain is telling us in the moment, I want to feel good. I want status in my community. I want everybody to think I'm doing well. That you're buying that in that moment. And so these are some activities that we recommend for people to do before they do financial education, so at least they can be self-aware, and then it gives everybody in a classroom an opportunity to kind of acknowledge where they're coming from before, so when they have to put numbers on a budget, they know what numbers to put on a budget, what is of value to them, right? Because we can't go redesign all of financial education that's out there. That fear or emotion, so oftentimes financial counselors will work with people that are in jobs that are, right, their skill set might have them be able to go to the next level job, or they may be able to level up a job. But if I live in financial fear and I don't have anything saved, I may stay in a job that provides me security because that's what I know. Right? What's the saying? The devil you know is the one that you don't, right? And so it's the same idea. And so we see people stay in situations, relationships, jobs, because they're living in financial fear. We don't often realize how many parts of our life money touches. It touches everything. And so we often teach financial education as rules and not guidelines. Right? Again, I always go back to the 50, 20, 30 rule because I feel like that's the one that's hard and fast and it's out there. But again, if I'm that hairdresser and I know that I'm gonna work May through September and make 65% of my income, 50, 20, 30, like I'm gonna feel most of the months out of the year like I'm not accomplishing the goal. But if the role was more, I do 3 heads of hair a week. Any week that I do over 3, I'm gonna put 1 full ticket price, whatever the hairdressing price, away into savings. So, and then maybe it's, if I get over 6, I'm gonna put 2 away towards savings. So if I do 3 in the week, I'm just living off the money. But if I'm doing 5 in the week, $1 amount goes into savings. If I do over 6, $2 amounts go into savings, right? But find me the hairdressing version of financial education.
Well, the other missing factor is almost all of these kids don't know how they're going to earn that money.
Exactly.
Which stresses them out.
And I think what we could all agree on in the world we're living in, we need people to want to go into all different jobs, right? So if financial education gets spiraled around 401ks and 403bs and the job you're looking at doesn't seem to provide those benefits, and I have this conversation a lot when we deal with parents, when we do group events with parents and child, especially if parents have very traditional, teacher, military, law enforcement type jobs where they come with all the benefits and the kid wants to be, just to be silly for a second, a social media influencer, right? We would all agree it's very difficult to become a social media influencer, but we do have students that figure out a way to get sponsorships and they're making money. So if they can make the money and then we can give them the education that they need about how do they go for their own IRA? How can they invest on their own? Yes, 401ks and 403bs are awesome to build retirement, but there are other pathways to doing it. But if we tell people, well, only these jobs are the ones that you should be going after, we're gonna have a lot of people not at the local ice cream parlor, and that's not fun when it's 88 degrees and we don't wanna go for ice cream, right? And so I think there's this thought of like, all jobs, the common denominator is money at the end of the week. What you do with that money and how you treat that money is really up to you. And if we could educate people a little bit more on the different ways to use that money to support their financial health, that would be so much more helpful. So oftentimes with financial literacy, and we talk to a lot of students a lot, they're not relating to the content, right? They're asking to be, so the American Psychological Association says that by the age of 7, a child understands money concepts. They've been in a home, it's mostly nonverbal communication. They've heard people either argue about money or we can afford it, we can't afford it, but there's not a whole lot of communication around how a paycheck comes in. Do you get paid monthly? Do you get paid biweekly? Do you get paid annually? Are you a sales job where you don't make a lot, but then you make commission, right? That is, for a 7-year-old, doesn't compute. But they've got this idea. And it usually starts, funny enough, at the book fair. The book fair is usually every kid's first opportunity to figure out who has money and who doesn't. They go to the book fair, everybody's there, and there's the kids on the classroom that are all like, I've got my $20, whatever, to buy a book. And then there's the kids that like, I didn't have any money. And that's the first narrative where they hear the words, oh, you must be rich, or oh, you must be poor. We're basing this all on the $5 at the book fair, right? And so that's where that initial money messaging comes from. But in the states that do offer financial education, traditional financial education doesn't show up to some point in high school. So we've got about a 10-year spread of no formalized education, and we've got these money narratives going on, right? And so you've started to create your own messaging, and now we're gonna put you in the classroom, and we're gonna show you a budgeting spreadsheet. And let's say you just happen to be from a family where mom and dad are paying for your cell phone, they take you clothes shopping. What numbers do you put on that budget? And so telling a student, hey, well, one day you'll have to pay rent, or you'll have to pay for your cell phone, or you'll have to pay for electric, right, is so far down the line for them that it's not really relatable. And so we have to get them to have skin in the game around understanding, well, what's one expense that I do have that I have to come up with that nobody's covering me on? There's that digestibility and comfortability around the content. So if I'm coming from a low-income area where I know that we're on food benefits, and now we're going to talk about a food budget, right? I'm all of a sudden like pulling into the back of the classroom because I don't have that ability to budget for food. We get whatever's on the SNAP benefit. We go into the store. If you ask me about whether I'm buying generic brands or name brands, there's probably a conversation there, because depending on who's running the food benefit money, depending on what kind of a shopper they are, right? So that portion becomes another place where students pull back. There's not a whole lot in life in general where we get to practice major life events. I always love, I think it's Dan Ariely in one of his behavioral finance books, he talks about all the major life decisions we make, there's no place to practice for. Anybody know anybody who ran a marathon? Did they decide yesterday that they were going to run 26 miles today? No. Yet we get married, we buy houses, we have children. There was no course to go practice. You don't get a practice husband. We got the egg. I don't know if those of you who went to high school, you got the egg, you carried around the egg. You had to keep the egg alive. I have 5 kids. That egg activity was nothing of what it's like raising children, right? So there's nowhere to practice these things. And so financial mistakes often cost us a whole lot of money. And they're worrisome. And depending on your outcome, that's going to either give you the confidence to be able to go make another financial decision, or you're going to pull back because, you didn't do it right, and you're nervous, fearful, shameful, guilty. So where do kids go to practice making financial decisions that won't cost them? We often say to parents, let kids feel, and it's a dictionary word, the pain of paying. Tightwad is the term, and not all kids are tightwads, but make them feel the pain of paying. Whether you give them an allowance, which I don't love allowance, that's my own personal, maybe I have too many kids, but give them the opportunity to make the transaction. Give them the opportunity to, sit across the register from someone and make that transaction. Because those are those opportunities to practice in a controlled environment where they can get good at making, those financial decisions. I've got $5, I want to buy this thing, what will I have left over, right? And think about where we live in the world today. Most of our money is digital. There's not that cash dollars. It's Venmo, it's PayPal, it's Chime, it's Cash App. So there's not a lot of opportunity to really have that tangible, physical money in your hand where you feel, I gave you $5 and I only got 82 cents back as my change. And now this is my buying power. Getting the feeling, again, back to this part, action and execution, is what we're seeing is the best for students. So anywhere where you can get the book fairs where they can run the fair, the candy sales, anything where they can be in that environment where there's transactions, that's actually some of the best financial education that we're seeing out there. Beyond the traditional, get them in the action. Get them to start. I've seen a few schools where they start these little entrepreneur groups and somebody will make t-shirts or somebody will make something, because it forces them to be less in the textbook and it gets them to be thinking about. So I had been given a task of, when I was running a nonprofit in New York City, to bank 862 unbanked kids. It was a workforce development program for New York City. And they said to me, you have to build financial education. These kids are completely financially uneducated. And I thought, I highly doubt New York City kids are they've got to be running around the city. So they've got to be working with money somehow. So after meeting the kids, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with areas that are called banking deserts. So that means there's absolutely no bank within their community. So it's payday loans, third-party lenders, that kind of situation. And so, and I've got my opinions on that. But I went into the classroom and I said, guys, tell me how you use money. Tell me how money flows in this environment. Before I start here, and I'm gonna sit you down and tell you all about how you're gonna budget with no banks, right? These kids don't have banks. They probably have either cash in their pocket or they are borrowing money out on the street. I needed to understand. And so after a few kids, give me their stories, one kid started to tell me that his brother's friend ran the bodega at the corner. Him and his brother would go in the morning before the bodega opened and take 2 cases of waters, and they would go down by the FDR, which is a major highway in New York City, and they would sell the waters. And at the end of the day, when they sold the waters, they'd bring the money back, so the kid who ran the bodega would put it in the register, nobody would get in trouble, and they would run this the next day. And this is how they made their money. And I thought, so you're working on credit, you've got arbitrage, right? You've got a spread. They're paying the kids so much for the case, and then they're selling the waters for more. So it sounds to me like you're quite financially educated. You're just working outside of our traditional financial system. So now how do I take the examples and the things you're doing, and how do I apply it back so you understand that you're actually not unintelligent. You're not educated. You just, if we can get you doing it within the system, it might cost you a lot less than going to a third-party check cashing place or payday lender to borrow when you need money. So again, that action and execution, people learn real quick what they need to do, and they know money's a motivator, so they'll get it done and they'll get it right. When education is compartmentalized and not integrated, right? Because we give the education. Now, do I need this piece of this education right this second? Maybe, sometimes, maybe not. That's why just-in-time education, right? Some of the best programs we've seen is when you give the education as you're giving a paycheck, because you've got the money in hand so you can make the immediate decision. If we're giving a whole bunch of education right now, but you're not going to use it for 5 years, if I'm telling you about retirement planning and you're 16 years old in high school and you don't have a job yet that has a 401k, a 403b, or you're going to contribute to your IRA, it's falling on deaf ears. So understanding maybe how to integrate stuff that becomes completely reliable, relatable in their moment at their life right now. So asking them, how are you handling money? What does that look like? If it's all Venmo transactions, what are they buying on Venmo? How are they moving that money around Venmo? And I get it, for some of us, especially at my age, I hate Venmo. I'm like, what's to see everybody's transactions? That seems like being naked in front of everybody. Like, I don't need that. But, for them, this is the environment they've grown up in, and money's moving around. I thought I heard a crazy statistic about the billions of dollars that moved through Venmo, Cash App, like not the PayPal one, but all the other 3. And I thought, wow, that's like, because when I think of my kids, it's all $2, $3, $4 transactions. But there's so many of them, right? And that's how they're working within each other. What I will say, just as a sidebar, with Venmo, I have found amongst this next generation, they are more likely to be able to have communication. Now, it's not really verbal communication, but it is communication around money, meaning that, so traditionally, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you went out with a friend for lunch, they didn't have cash on them, you were like, I'll cover the bill, you pay me back. Without fail, we all have that friend that like forgets to pay you back, or like doesn't remember they owe money. With Venmo or PayPal or any of those apps, right, you don't have to say face to face, hey, you owe me money. You can just keep sending those reminders. And so I find that this group is much more forward in saying, you owe me $8, you owe me $7.62, but you don't have to say it out loud. It's the same thing with the loud budgeting that's going on. People are, I think, done being called cheap or frugal. They're at the point where they're like, I'm using this term, I'm telling you I'm loud budgeting, don't call me names, right? And so I give them credit for really being able to bring that to the forefront of how they're gonna handle their money communication a lot better. And so when we do stuff like Money Habitudes, there is that opportunity to understand their blocks, understand what mentally or physically is holding them up. And again, it could be the family system, it could be the social media, and that's what a bunch of these activities that are in this workbook allow them to do. As we meet people where they are, we want to create that self-awareness, so we always recommend start with any activity that does self-awareness. What kind of a person am I? Am I late? Am I early? Am I status driven? Am I, driven by giving? Am I the person that just wants to pay for everybody because I want to make everybody happy? Understand motivations. Is it to have the best of everything? Is it just to be liked by a group, right? Really getting the students to think about how they use money. Able to apply their personal situation to their financial education, again, back to their family system.
You've mentioned quite a bit about creating self-awareness. How do you recommend doing that?
So, shameless plug, I would tell you to use the Money Habitudes assessment, which is it's the Myers-Briggs of money personality assessments, but you can have them create self-awareness strictly around telling a story of what money looks like in their family system. So does money look like mom or dad work? Mom says yes to things, dad says no to things, right? Like just self-awareness isn't, remember the students, they're young, so they don't have a full grasp on it, but they've already got that money messaging that they've been given. So just bringing that to the forefront, they're gonna be able to say, like, that makes me feel good when mom says yes to things and then tells me to hide it from dad because we weren't supposed to buy that. Or it makes me feel good, I've lived with divorced parents, dad buys me really expensive things when I go over there, and I don't bring them over to mom's house because it's going to make her feel bad, right? They've already got those kind of things.
Do you, I don't mean to take your pen.
No, please.
Do you have 3 or 4 basic generic questions that you would ask?
I do. So the biggest one we always love to ask is, what is your first memory of money? The 3 things that come up the most: Tooth Fairy, the selling lemonade or some kind of something in front of the house, and the usual conversation around that is, why was I selling it? There's the 2 things that come up is like, there was a charity, something happened in the community, and I was gonna sell lemonade because I really wanted to help, or I really wanted to buy ice cream at the corner store, and so I was gonna sell my lemonade so I could go buy my candy bars and my ice cream, right? And think about those 2 motivations, who those 2 different people are. One is motivated as a helper, one is motivated as a self-interest, right? And so that, again, that kind of self-awareness. And then the other question we love to ask is, what was your first job? But for students, sometimes they haven't had their first job yet. At the college level, usually that's the one that we put in.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Great questions. And so we just want to increase that personalization. We just want to get the students to start with them. Again, I do a whole session on putting the personal in personal finance, right? Because we talk about personal financial education, we talk about personal finance, a lot of the stuff is generic. It's anything but personal. It doesn't know that even in retirement planning, if you have a child with special needs, that retirement plan looks completely different than a family that doesn't have a child with special needs. So the personalization has to come first, because that's what's going to get you the buy-in with who's sitting across from you. So as we just close up here, I've said this a lot, just look at the 2 columns. We've got personal. Those are your habits, your situation, your passions, your fear. We've got traditional finance. We've got financial product offerings. We've got savings rules. We've got credit scores. We've got terms and conditions and paperwork. If I have a fear and I'm looking at my credit score that I just recently got divorced and my husband had put all this stuff and I walk away with a 580 credit score, my fear is now accelerated. Right? It's very hard to go and plea your story, hey, my credit score should really be 720. I was not the offender, right? But financial infidelity is absolutely worse than regular infidelity, because it sits with you even after the person's gone. So when we think about the products, they don't fit the people. when we really look at different levels of capability, and I know we don't have a whole lot of time yet, but I just will give you an opportunity to read through these. We've got person A, unbanked in a low-income community, using his contacts to borrow waters. This was the story I told earlier. And at person B, we've got a senior level exec who's done a DIY financial plan. He was given RSUs, which for those of you who may not know, those are restricted stock units, many years ago. He wanted to do some home improvements, so he sold them. He was like, yeah, I've got some money here. Forgetting that the financial education component of that piece is understanding what the tax situation is gonna look like. So when we think about financial education, we often just put it in these buckets that it's only for these people or those people, or these are the people that need it. We all need it. At every level of our life, as we grow, it continues to grow with us. And it becomes cumulative knowledge over time. But if we get up to this level of knowledge, we have a hard time and get frustrated, and our financial biases, especially if we're successful with financial education, we have a very hard time with the people that we're like, why aren't you listening? Why aren't you saving? Why aren't you investing? Come on, just do it, right? And so we have to roll it back to the people and understand that based on their situation, they're not absorbing that financial education. So back to my circle of knowledge. It never ends. It keeps going and going and going. I don't know if any of you here are AFCs, but if you are, that is the completion code if you need CEU credits. We always offer that, everything at Money Habitudes, because a lot of accredited financial counselors use our tools. But I'll open it up for any questions, if anybody has any questions for me. I think we've got a couple of minutes.
How do most teachers use your cards?
Tools.
Yeah, your tools.
Yeah, so what I see with most teachers is they put it at the beginning, and then they bring it back throughout.
Okay.
Most of the teachers that I talk to say to me the same thing. They're like, the education especially if it's a full semester course, they're like, it gets dry or whatever, so it's great to be able to bring back some of the cards. They're more playful as you do it once. Again, when we were talking before about if you don't have decks for everyone, you just bring up a few cards. You have people start telling money stories. And the money stories then become, well, that's what they must have budgeted for, or that's what they must have saved for, or that's what they must have used credit for, right? Those stories become applicable to the course content that you're studying. And the stories really put the person back at the front of the financial education. And so money stories are really the way we see teachers use our tool the most. Less about the full assessment. When our digital assessment, when people use that, they're really looking for that diagnostic, this is what I'm doing, is this gonna match up with my financial health, my financial journey? At the student level, it's more conversation, ice-breaking.
What's the pricing for 2 or 3 decks?
So you can buy a single deck for $19.95. We don't require any training. You can read about it. We have support material that you can buy a book or read about it. We offer training. So there are schools that want their financial education, so they'll hire one of us to come out either virtually or in person to do a full training. That's an option as well. But again, at the student level, you can just go with the basic. If you stop by our booth, you can go through some of the card decks and you'll just go through the statements. Remember, the statements have no numbers. They're not about financial jargon. It's about when I go to the store, do I need to buy something? Sometimes yes or no. And based on how you put the statements in the piles, each statement is correlated to a money habitude. And then you're able to see where your dominant habitudes lie. So, and I apologize, last year we did the session of just how to understand what money habitudes was. And we were like, oh, this year we'll do this, but next year I'll have to tell Shauna, we'll have to, because we keep getting new teachers, which is great. But I didn't think, and I have a card here, if anybody, it's a free event, we'll host it virtually, you can register, and it'll be best practices if you want to incorporate the Money Habitudes workbook into your sessions. And to your question, Karsten, the pricing on the booth, there's a conference price for like a classroom pack. It's like 25 of each decks, workbooks, the professional guide for the teacher. And I don't know the price of it off my head. I'll have to go to the booth and look. Any other questions? Thank you all. I appreciate everybody coming. This was awesome. It's good to meet you all.